Great, awesome. Let's get started. In this session, as you have asked, we are going to cover these 4 different topics, callback functions. So before I go on to the next item, I should correct this. Callback function. Callback is not two, it is just one single word, not 2 different. It's not like callback function. It's not like this. It is just callback, okay? This is first. The other is scope, recursion, the concept of return. So these 4 topics that you have asked me to cover, they are not in the correct order, because if we want to go from the basic to the advanced, what we should do instead is to first cover, for instance, the concept of return, because what we have in all different programming languages is something that we call control flow primitives, which is a way that we could actually code in a programming language, using code blocks and different types of blocks like if, else, switch cases and stuff like that, and even functions. And return is one of those use cases, which is part of the basics of a programming language. Recursion actually is something that, again, goes second, and scope could be covered as third, and callback functions are actually the most advanced topic in this list, okay? Do you mind if we cover based on using this?
It's fine, you are the expert, so it's fine.
So for every single one of these topics, we are gonna create new files, but instead of running the code inside a browser, what we could also do is to run the code using Node.js, because we are dealing with pure JavaScript at this, at least for the first 3 topics. We don't actually need to do it inside a browser, because it is just JavaScript, and JavaScript in Node.js and JavaScript in browser are both work the same. When I say Node.js, it means that server-side JavaScript. And when I say in browser, I mean in browser. Let me just show you. For instance, you see this index.js in src folder. So let's just do something here. Let's do console.log and say, hello, Luca. Now, what I'm going to do is just save this. I'm going to create a new simple HTML file, index.html, right next to that JavaScript file. So, let me just remove this one and use Google, use WebStorm's default templates HTML file, index HTML5. Yeah, as you see, it has some pre-written boilerplate code. So, hello, Luca. Let's say this is the page, and here inside this page, we don't have much. This is H1. And hello, Luca. And just let's add a script tag. What is it? Index.js.
Yeah.
Great. So let's run this, let's just open this file in a browser. Yes, sorry, I guess I have it right. Do you see my other screen?
Yeah, I can see the other part of the web page.
Yes, sorry for this. Don't know why it doesn't move. I guess it is because let's just open it in Firefox. Yeah. Okay, checking for add-ons. Great. So do you see this?
Yeah.
Now what I'm going to do is just to open developer console and go to the console. So do you see this hello Luca inside the console? Where do you think this comes from?
From the JavaScript file?
Exactly. So as you see, all we did was just to create a HTML file and add the script tag to that HTML file. Mm-hmm. Now, instead of doing this, what we could also do is to open a terminal like this, go inside the folder, or we could even run it from here. Run that JavaScript file using Node, and the way that it works is just simply doing this: Node src/index. Oh, sorry. Okay, yes. Here we go. You see what it does? It just runs the code, run the JavaScript code that we have inside the browser, exactly similar to the way that Firefox or Google Chrome run the code. The point about these three different engines that we just talked about: first Node, Firefox, and Google Chrome. Actually, Google Chrome and Node, they both have the exact same JavaScript virtual machine, which is called V8. And so JavaScript in its core is exactly the same in Google Chrome and Node.js. So for us to cover the basics of JavaScript, all we have to do is just to either run it inside the browser or run it right here, which is much easier because we don't have to leave the screen, actually. Does it work for you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Okay. If you have any question in the middle of the session, just go ahead and interrupt me.
Cool, will do. Thank you.
No problem at all. Okay, that's it. This is the first file that we have here. Before I go through the list, what I'm going to do is just to give you, the most basic stuff that you have to know. First off, that we have a global scope. When you have a JavaScript file like this, there is no function. There's nothing. If you define a variable like this, like, my var equals something, the default behavior of JavaScript works like this. This variable becomes a global variable because this is exactly, we are going to cover this part with more detail when we go to and cover the scope topic. But what you see here, the first thing that you write in a JavaScript code, it is written in a global scope. So we have different ways to prevent variables like this, to prevent them from becoming global variables, because global variables are not safe enough. Defining global variables is not a good practice at all. So what you see here, this is a global scope. There's nothing here. Whatever you put here is going to be executed right when the script tag is processed by the browser, or right when you call it using Node. There are some differences between the way that scopes work in Node in compare with browser. But what I'm going to do here is just show you how it actually works. So you see that we have created a variable called myVar. Now let's do something else. Let's create another file, another JavaScript file, whatever, main.js. And now just say console.log. As you see, there is no variable inside this file, right? But if I do my var, what do you think happens?
It gave us an undefined
So
an error.
Let's, okay, let me add the script tag to the browser. And now let's just see how it works in browser. Okay, here we go. We've got something here. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
So as you see, it didn't say undefined. That's what I'm talking about when I say it becomes global. You can have access to that variable throughout your whole application.
Because you actually, right, because you declared it in the other file. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so this is called global variable. But in Node.js, things work differently. If I want to do the same in Node.js, I have to, for instance, let's try this in Node.js. There is no way that we have this index.html in browser to link all of our script, to inject all of our script tags to the page, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in here, in Node.js, what you have to do is to require another file inside another JavaScript file. For instance, what I could do here is something like this. I could require index.js inside main.js. Now, let's run it using Node.js. Instead of index.js, now I have to run main. Now, as you see, it says my var. It says, no problem. It says my var is not defined. As you see, things are different, when it comes to global variable. But in Node.js, if you want to, change this my var and convert it to a global variable, what you could do, we have two different global.myvar equals my var. If I do this, now if I run the code again, as you see, it says something. Okay? Do you see the console log?
Yeah.
So if you read the console, it says deprecation warning. Global is deprecated. Use global in lowercase. In the old versions of Node.js, instead of global in lowercase, that was what we had to use to define global variables. Now we could just simply use global. So this is a better practice. If you want to create a global variable, do you see now? Hello, Luca, something. This is exactly the same console log that we had in browser. So there's one quick, as you see, there's difference. If you simply define a variable using var statements like this in browser, it becomes global with it works as if all of your JavaScript files are exactly concatenated and converted, and they have become one single file. So that's why creating global variables is not a good practice. But there's one quick thing that you should know. In browser, similar to this global, what we also have is window. The better way of creating global variable, if you have to, is instead of creating using var statements to create global variables, the better way of doing that is just to attach that to the global variable, to the global object. The global object inside browser environment is called window. So if I do window.myvar equals my var, now Now I have to comment this out, go to main.js, comment this part out as well. Now my code works in browser, the same as, here we go, hello Luca, something. Okay, so as you see in browser, we have two different ways to create global variables, either using var statements outside of, in the root file, which is not a good practice. And the other way is just to attach that variable or that value to window, which is a global, which is the alternative of global that we have in Node.js. So, but it doesn't make any sense because we actually need to be able to create global, create variables. It is something that we usually need. We need to be able to create variables. But we don't actually need to, create global variables. So how we could do that, how we could achieve this goal? In JavaScript, what we have is the only safe scope is a function. So this is what we call an IIFE. If you create a function without any name, and if you wrap the whole function in a pair of parentheses and execute that function right away, now whatever you put inside this function is scoped inside that function. That's why you might have seen in some JavaScript libraries that we usually wrap everything inside an IIFE. Okay, what I just said about this is how I should do this. You see this? I wrapped everything inside this function that I just said is called IIFE. IIFE stands for Invoked Function Expression. Okay? Make sense?
Yeah.
So this is called immediately invoked function expression, and we usually use it to create, as you see, safe scopes for our JavaScript files, but again, safe scope for our JavaScript files, which are meant to be called inside browsers, because we don't have this issue in Node. Okay, now if I do this, create just my var like this and comment out this window.myvar thing, come back here and do this console.log my var. As you see, now I have a reference error because there is no my var anymore. What happened there is just because of this immediately invoked function expression that I used here, whatever I put inside this function becomes scoped to that function, not global anymore. Make sense?
Yeah.
Great. So now, again, if you have to create global variables, then this is the way to go. You could just attach your attributes, the global variable that you want to the global object of your environment. Global object of browser environment is window. So if I just run this code now, here we go. It works. Okay. This was the first thing that you had to know. Whenever you add JavaScript files to your index.html file, it works as though all of these files are concatenated together, and you don't have to see them as different files unless you have used IIFEs. If you don't have used IIFEs, then all of these files are actually just a couple of different files, which at the end browser is gonna concatenate them all together and execute the JavaScript code all from start to the end. And whatever variable that you create is going to be global throughout all of your JavaScript files, which is not a good practice. So one quick question I have for you. As you just saw here, I added a script tag to the body. What is the difference between adding a script tag to the body and compare with adding that script tag to the head? What do you think is the difference?
Just to avoid that, we're going to wait till everything is going to be loaded before the script tag is going to be executed, if there is any execution.
Yeah, it's just, it was very close. Whatever you put inside this head tag, you could, add link tags for your CSS files, your script tag for your JavaScript files, or you could put them all inside your head. But then what happens is that browser is going to start downloading all of those files from the server, and browser is going to pause. It's not going to display anything during the process of downloading CSS and JavaScript file that you have put inside that head tag. But if you put it at the end of the body, what happens is all of the HTML that you have inside your body tag is going to be displayed first, and then JavaScript is going to be loaded and added to the page. Make sense?
Yeah. So, but still the CSS files is always good to put them in the end anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. The CSS files, JavaScript files are better to be at the end of your body tag, unless you have a specific reason for that. In some specific cases, we might need to add the script tag to the head. But in most of the cases, the better practice is to add the script tag to the end of your, inside the body as the last section of your, HTML code. But for your CSS files, if you display HTML without any CSS, doesn't make any sense, does it?
No.
Because it doesn't have any,
yeah, it's not.
It doesn't have a good user experience. The better practice is to, if you want to, again, don't wait for, for the whole CSS to be downloaded. What you could do is to at least put that section of your CSS files that is in charge of, the home page in your head tag, and the rest in the body. Because whatever CSS that is going to be used initially in the first load of the page should be inside the head. Okay. That's great.
Just one question, Maren. I've seen people that are in some codes, in some HTML files. Some people put the script tags inside the body tag, and some put it between the body closure, between the body and the HTML closure. Is there any difference for that?
Do you think? I don't think I understand what you said.
So if if underneath the closure body, yeah, exactly.
Okay, so let me put it this way. Modern browser, in modern browsers, you don't actually need to add body tag and head tag anymore. Okay? Whatever you want, you could put it right inside the HTML. But if you use this structure, if you use the structure of head and body, it is not a good practice to do that, to add the script right here. You have to either stick to using the older structure, which is HTML head and body, or the new structure, which is just the HTML tag, and inside that you could use whatever you want. You could put whatever you want to, and the order that you put your stuff is the same order that browser is going to use to render. So And I don't think it's a good practice to do this. If you don't want to add it to the head, it's the better practice to add it to the end of body before the closing tag. This is the better practice in my opinion. So, okay. No more questions for this part?
No.
Great. Let me just remove these extra lines. The first question that you had, so the reason that I had to explain all of this is for us to have a platform, for us to have a JavaScript file like this, so that we could start covering the topics that you had asked. So now we have this code here. We could clean everything. We could just go back to index.html, remove the main.js. Now, all we have is just index.js. Just one quick question. One quick point. I said we usually use IIFEs inside browser, but IIFEs work the same in Node as well, because again, this is the way that JavaScript works. So when you have this, you could be sure that your code is the same in Node and browser. In every known JavaScript engine, IIFEs work the same. By the way, there are different types of creating IIFEs, one of which is the one that I just showed you. The other one is like, instead of wrapping the function definition inside a pair of parentheses, it says wrap the whole thing like this. This is the way that Douglas Crockford, uses and, advocates for everyone to use, because he doesn't like this part, because it says it doesn't look good to have an extra piece, but this looks more,
elegant.
Yeah, but I don't think
there's any difference in the actual usability.
No, there is no difference at all. But the other way, again, to create IIFEs is this, which is my preferred one, plus function without any. You don't have to wrap your function definition inside a pair of parentheses to be able to call that immediately. All you have to do is just to add this plus sign before that function keyword. What it does, it actually converts this function code, this piece, to something executable. So the point is, in some libraries that if you go through GitHub and look for instance, bootstrap.js, I guess bootstrap.js is using this pattern. But at the end, all of these three different ways of creating IIFEs work exactly the same. Okay? So, but in my opinion, the better practice is the last one, because there are some quick differences. One of the reasons that we create IIFEs is concatenation and modification. Because in real world applications, what we usually do is sometimes we have more than thousands of JavaScript files, and it doesn't make any sense to add every single one of them as a script tags to the page. If we do that, then it is gonna it is gonna take forever for your HTML page to render. But instead, what we do is we concatenate and minify all of the code into one single code and add add one single script tag to the page. So then, for instance, if you have different JavaScript files, all of them wrapped in IIFEs, you have it's going to be something like this. So if you don't add the semicolon like here, after being concatenated, let me remove this piece. And let's just use one pattern. Okay, let's say this is the one pattern that we use. If you have two different files, let's say a.js and b.js, okay, your code for a.js goes here and your code for b.js goes here. After concatenation, what you have is one single piece of code. So if you, for instance, have a piece of code here, console.log A, console.log B, what you see here with these comments is going to change, you know, to something like this. It's going to be minified, you know, all of the extra spaces is going to be removed like this. All of the comments are going to be removed as well. So let's remove all of them. And then it's going to become in just one single, you will have one single line of code. So this is the main.js file, you know, your application app.main.js. This is the one that you're going to add to as a script tag to your page. In a real world application, you know, this is the way that we usually handle these, you know, our script code, script tags. So, but what I said was like this. If you, for instance, forget to add the semicolon here in line number 6, what happens is the concatenated code is going to be like this, which is, as you see, it is not going to work the same because of these pair of parentheses. So if you have different pair of parentheses right, you know, next together, so this is going to behave differently because JavaScript is going to consider all of it as one single statement then. But if you put your semicolon, JavaScript is going to consider these two as two different statements. So that's why it matters for you to always put your semicolons. Make sense?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, now we have the first thing that we need. An IIFE, a JavaScript file, and we know now that why we should do this. As I said, the better practice, in my opinion, is to use this one because it causes less trouble in minification, and you know, even if you forget to add the semicolon, it's going to work because of this plus sign.
Okay.
So that's why it's a better practice, in my opinion. Although I'm not going to forget to add the semicolon because it's somehow in my unconscious mind always to add that. Okay, let's get started. First thing that we have in JavaScript is everything revolves around two different concepts. First is objects. The other concept that is really important in JavaScript is functions. So we have two different topics, objects and functions. Objects are just, you know, are dumb. They hold the data. So for instance, if you have any experience with any type of programming language, we always have objects in almost every single, you know, object-oriented programming language. And in JavaScript, to create an object, what you could do, you have different ways, like this. Object equals literal with curly brackets. This is an empty object now. You could add attributes like name. And as you see here, I don't use equal sign. I use this instead. So I could add arrays like this, lists, and to create arrays, you could also use curly, not curly, just brackets. Or you could also do this, which is not, again, a good practice. Never use array or object as the creator. For instance, you could also use object equals new object. It works the same, but it's not the good way of creating objects. The same applies for arrays. So this is a simple object that you could create. In objects, keys should be strings. Name is a string, list is a string, and they cannot have spaces between them. For instance, like this. If you want to add a space like this in your key, you have to wrap the whole key in quotation. So now you could have keys like this. We don't usually add keys like this. Okay, so now if you do this, object dot name, the value of object dot name is going to be an empty string. So what you could do, you could learn about objects on your own. But if you have any questions, I'm going to answer your questions. But the next, let's say, if I want to, tell you about three main concepts of the whole JavaScript, I would say objects, functions, and events. So objects, I guess you could learn them by yourself. And events, we are going to cover them later, when we cover callback functions. And now it's the turn that we create, we see how we could create a function. So we have different ways to create functions. First one is just this. I guess you have seen it before. This is a function expression. So now you don't need to actually add semicolon here because this is a function expression. You could have this criteria in mind. Whenever you have equation, you need to add a semicolon. So the other way to create a function is using this. So you see this? This is exactly the same with quick difference is you need to add semicolon now. So what is the difference between this one and this one? Semicolon and main. You see this here? Whenever you use a function expression like the one that we have in line number 5, what happens is JavaScript itself creates a variable with the function name, which means function name and the variable name are two different things. But when you use function expressions, they become one. So, but actually, you could have thousands of JavaScript, thousands of functions with the same name. Let's do that. Let's create another one, main2. Let me comment this one out. Yeah. So this is main2, but the name is still main. So let's just do console.log main. Console.log main. Now let's create another main function. Main2 and main3. So this is main3. All of these three functions are actually, you could call them like this, but main, you can't have access to a function by its name. A name is just a label and it's not unique. So you can have access to a function by its variable. which means like this. So if you create in line number 13, the way that we have created this function, the name is main, but the variable name is main too. We cannot have access to this function like using its function name. So I could, so now if I call this, it's gonna, here we go, it works, okay? Which means we can have thousands of functions with the same name, because name.
Is it a good good practice to do that?
No, it's not a good practice. It doesn't mean that it is a good practice, but if you accidentally do that, it is gonna work.
It's still gonna work, yeah.
Yeah, so there's one quick difference here though. What happens if, again, you also have it in your mind already about recursion. If inside a function, I want to have access to the same function, if I want to have this, create recursive operations, you could use now the name of the function. This is the only point. If inside main2 function, if you do main, you see this? This main, this function call is going to point to itself. If you do here main, main like this, it's going to point to itself. You see? But if you name it differently, something like, main2, then this main in line number 14 is going to point to this function above. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, great. And we are going to cover recursion as we go on, but so far we know how to create functions, and each function, so what I'm going to do is just to comment this out and go up at this part. Oh, okay, when I think of a function, I consider something like a machine which has an input and also an output. You give it something, and it does some, process on that input data that you have provided, and it returns something. At this function that we have, do you see any return statements?
No.
So now, what happens if I do this? Return a value equals main. Let me just put it this way. Let's say, if I say var return value equals, again, something, and now come back here and say return value equals main. If I do console.log return value, what do you think happens? What do you think is going to happen here?
It's not going to get any value in return.
What are we going to have in console?
Nothing.
Not correct.
Oh, sorry. The main is going to print out console.log. The main one.
No. Let's see what happens. Undefined. So, yeah, other than the main, it is going to print out undefined, which means the value, it has a value. Return value variable here has a value, but its value is return, but its value is undefined, which means if you create a function but don't add any return statements to that. It is the same exact thing as doing this. Return undefined. So this is the key. Every single function in JavaScript has a return value, even if you don't add the return statement. If you don't add it, the return value would be undefined. If you don't add it, these two functions, for instance, this one without return statements and this one with return statement, they work exactly the same. So if you don't add any return statements, it is as though you have added a return undefined. Make sense?
It does. So, you know, it appeared that there is gonna main, so the console.log got printed. But why is it coming undefined as well? So why did we haven't returned?
Let's cover that one more time. Let's go through the code. From here, let me remove this comment. You see, at this line number 3, we don't have, actually, we haven't done anything except for just creating. So far, nothing. In line number 7, we have created a variable. In line number 9, the reason that I did this, because let's say, if I comment out this line, what happens is this. The value of return value variable is something.
Mm-hmm.
So if I do this, because every single function in JavaScript has a return value, this variable that we have in here, we have created in line number 7, is going to be changed. You know, its value is going to be overwritten, and with the return value of main. That's why I created that in 2 different lines to explain this, that even though I don't have any return statement in my main function, but still, you know, doing this is going to change the value of a variable. So if I do this, if I put one console log before my function call, and one console log after that, what do you think is going to happen?
We're going to have something and after undefined.
Great.
Something main.
Something main undefined. So as you see, main happens inside the main function, and undefined happens right after that. So, but line number 9 and line number 11, as you see, the code is exactly the same. Just prints the value of return value variable.
But still, it invokes the main function as well.
In line number 10, yes. Yeah. In line number 10, we have, what we have it here, we invoke main function. So this is the key part. Whenever you invoke a function and you put the return value inside a variable, it's going to change the value. It doesn't matter if you don't have return statement. So if I do this, for instance, return something, a value like a number, 10, what do you think happens now?
You'll print 10 instead of undefined.
Exactly. This is what we are going to see. Something main 10. Main is actually inside the function, is happening inside the function. 10 is happening outside of that function. Okay. So do you have any questions regarding return statements?
No. Thank you.
Oh, do you get it now?
Yeah.
So before I go for the next part, so here there are some restrictions. If I do this, what do you think happens? Yeah,
it's not gonna print
line
anything.
number 4. Let's try it. It works the same. So in some cases, if you add a new line in JavaScript, it works the same. It's not going to break anything. Or the more common way of doing this, especially when we want to chain on something, we use this signature. You see this? And it works the same. You see this? But if I do this, even my editor, now understand that it's not a valid code. You cannot add a new line break inside your return statements. So return statements are somehow different in compare with other type of statements that we have. For instance, one of the differences is this one that I just said. You can't add new line breaks in the middle of your return statements. Okay. Now I guess we have covered almost everything about returns. I guess there are different types of use cases that involve return statements. For instance, if you have something like this, if let's say a Boolean, a condition here, oh yeah, a condition, something, and then else like this. So let me, if the structure of your function, the skeleton of your function is something like this code, you could change that code. So let's just say main else, main if. If you have this, the structure is something like this, you could simply do this. You could just return here, which means I want to stop if that happens, and then just remove the else, because if that happens, the return is going to stop that case. So what you see here, if something return without any else, go to the next statements, is exactly the same as the previous one that I had with if else. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So this return statements in the middle of a function, in the middle of a if statement, are usually used to stop the whole function. So for instance, there are some cases that in the middle of a function, you have already found the return value. You want to return 12, for instance. If that condition is true, what you want to do is to return 12. So, and in that case, you no longer need to add else statements here, because this return already stops that process. So this is, I guess, there are other types of situations that return statements, change the process, change the workflow, but I guess that's enough for now.